Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio in Atlanta, Georgia. It's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by Kennesaw State University's Executive MBA program, the accelerated degree program for working professionals looking to advance their career and enhance their leadership skills. And now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, broadcasting live from Fintech South 2024 at the Woodruff Arts Center. So excited to be talking to my next guests, Morris and Glen Sarvady, and they are with the TAG Fintech Society. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, before we get too far into things, Mike, why don't you share a little bit about TAG Fintech Society? How are you serving folks?
Yeah, so we started about 2010 and really trying to promote this wonderful ecosystem we have here for fintech in Atlanta. And with that, we want to pull people together through networking events, content, and one of the things Glenn will talk about in a minute is our ecosystem report, which really tries to dive into how great our ecosystem is and what it consists of. All
right. So, Glenn, why don't you share a little bit about the report?
Sure. We've been doing this report taking kind of different angles of the ecosystem for, I'd say at least 10 years. This year, one of the things we took a look at, if you think about the word fintech, it's actually the combination of two words, financial and technology. And we spend a lot of time as the Technology Association of Georgia probably focusing more on the technology side. But it doesn't exist without the fin side. And that's one of the things we took a closer look at this time, particularly the financial institutions. At one point, there was much more tension where the fintech companies kind of thought they were going to eat banks' lunch and kind of take over and disrupt and pretty much knock them out of business. I think both sides have realized that there's much more they can do together than there is that they can do separately in heated battle with one another. You'll find that most fintech companies actually make the majority of their revenue from the billings that they put out to banks and credit unions. So it's a pretty symbiotic relationship, and I think it's continuing in that direction, and that's part of the ecosystem that I think that Georgia's particularly strong at.
Now, are you finding growth or more and more companies starting at serving the fintech community as a whole, and are companies moving here to Georgia to be part of our ecosystem?
I'd say yes and yes. Would you agree, Mike?
I agree with that.
We've got a list. It's an ecosystem map that we update on a regular basis. On an annual basis, we actually print it, but it's always updated on our website, georgiafintech.org. We always have new companies coming in there, but frankly, we've got several that, as we like to say, they're just kind of hiding in plain sight, that they've been doing fintech in this space for some time, and there's been 3 or 4 that I've just learned about in the last 6 months. We've added them to the list too. We're over 260 at this point.
Now, what about kind of verticals within that niche? Is that a growing area as well?
Yeah, within the niche, we're seeing a lot of diversity in the types of ideas coming forward in the areas where they can help the financial institutions. It has become a lot more collaborative, and I think now the fintechs are starting to really realize that we really need the bank's understanding of compliance and anti-money laundering and all the different things they have to worry about. On the bank side, that it's a two-sided coin. They both have to help out on this. So we're seeing a lot of good diversity in ideas and ways to help the consumers that work at the customers of the banks, and also with the banks themselves, with how they're able to serve their customers better.
Another way we talk about it sometime is again, this kind of the subunits, RegTech, regulatory technology. That's definitely a big piece, and there's all kinds of applications. I think McKinsey was one of the ones that did the studies. One of the biggest areas for opportunity within artificial intelligence, AI, which everyone's talking about, is in financial services. So we're seeing all kinds of companies pop up that even if they hadn't been doing something that could have been called artificial intelligence before, they are now.
Now, how are we navigating this balance between the customer who's wanting speed as quickly as possible? They want also transparency, and then also deal with all the cybersecurity issues that come along with speed. The other side of the coin when it comes to speed, of how do you protect the person from somebody else who's trying to leverage speed also?
Yeah, and so unfortunately, a lot of the banking technology is getting dated, and so it's really having that front end omni-channel experience for the customer that they're more used to with other industries, right? Mm-hmm. They get into Amazon and other and eBay and different places like that. So you're really having the ability to have that knowledge, but I think a lot of it is the reg tech itself too coming into play, is really helping get in there and help them with the regulatory issues that the banks are facing and also the fintechs are facing. But, and that's on the customer side too, because it's the protection. It's like, hey, how do we make sure they have cyber resilience? These fintechs are quick to get started, quick to get building. They've got to build product and they've got to take it to market. And sometimes there's gaps in their security.
Right. So they're just want to go at full speed all the time.
Yeah.
And then there's got to be somebody that's saying, hey, hit the brakes here a little bit. Let's learn something first, and then we can make some adjustments.
Yep, and that
balance is the magic, right?
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.
That's the challenge.
And that's where the banks have a lot of good experience because they have had to do vendor management and due diligence over these fintechs for years, and they've had regulatory oversight. And so when the fintechs get in, they sometimes don't know these areas of compliance, and they have gaps. And so these partnerships with the banks really help them learn. Sometimes it's frustrating.
Right. Both sides are frustrated,
yes,
though, right?
Yes. But they're getting to a happy medium. They're starting to understand how to speak bank on the fintech side,
right,
and understand the compliance and the alphabet soup of all the different compliance things they need to worry about.
I was going to say, one of the things they can always do is agree to not like the regulators. And we've had a lot of great presentations here from the regulatory authorities who belong in this conversation for exactly the reason that you mentioned. And I think, it's a delicate balance or a natural tension, whatever you want to call it. You do have the need for speed, the desire for speed, but you have the desire for safety too, especially in something like financial services, which may not necessarily apply the same way. I think it's a much more important thing to be safe than it is in some other things where you're not dealing with something like people's life savings. And,
right, exactly. Like that stakes are extremely high and extremely personal when something happens to you. Right.
And it's another one of those, and again, it's kind of a never ending loop where, the fraudsters have access to new technology as well. So it's always this arms race of who's going to be ahead.
Right.
So there's the artificial intelligence that gets in the hands of
right,
fraudsters,
the bad people too,
creating
right?
deep fakes and faking voices, spoofing, breaking passwords. But then you can also use those same tools to make sure you create defenses.
And then I don't know if the listener understands that the bad guys that are doing this are not just some kid in the basement with Cheetos and Red Bull. Right? Like this is organized groups of people that are behind some of the fraud.
They run like corporations. I mean, they are very well organized. They have research and development. They've
best
got
practices.
best practices.
They're walking into an office with a briefcase and a whiteboard, right? And that's how they're doing their work.
Yeah, retained earnings to go build more tools and build the next mousetrap to get us. So yeah, it's a continuous battle. And that is where, again, the banks, I think, have a leg up to help the fintechs because they've had to deal with it for 30 years now. And these fintechs are learning, and they're doing a good job, but it does take a little time. But yeah, we do want to protect the consumer at the final piece and with the money. And again, faster fraud, payments are faster fraud sometimes. So we have to have the reg tech that can help us with that as well to look for that in real time.
And it's kind of disturbing that, we've been talking about software as a service forever, banking as a service. We have all these different things. Frankly, I just heard this term recently. Fraud as a service is out there, literally.
Wow.
Somebody sets up shop. Hey, you want to come and commit fraud? Come talk to us. Right. We know how to do it.
We're the experts.
Yeah, phishing as a service. You're going to set up a phishing campaign and have at it.
So where do you see the opportunity as maybe as a whole for fintech and specifically to the Atlanta and Georgia?
I think the main area I'm seeing, and we're starting to get more towards this, is having that true understanding the data flows and the transaction flows from the customer through the fintech, through the bank and back, and making sure we really understand the control points. Because in the last few years, especially banking as a service, if people are familiar with that, where the bank is basically the wholesaler and the fintech's the retailer going out and acquiring the customers, we need to make sure that we understand the gaps there, and where the regulators have gotten uncomfortable with it and getting harder on the banks is finding those gaps and not realizing it's not that I thought you were doing this. Well, I thought you were doing this. Kind of who's on first, right? And so now they're getting better about that. But I really think understanding those transaction and data flows through the process and really understand who's responsible, who's monitoring, and reporting on those is where we're going to get the holes fixed.
And I think, Mike, you used the phrase omni-channel a little bit earlier, which basically means people have a lot of different preferences. Some people prefer to bank at a branch. Some people prefer to bank through their digital phone. Clearly, the trend is toward the digital side of things, but we're finding increasingly that people don't necessarily just gravitate toward one way of interacting with their financial institution. They do it through a lot of different ways. We just finished a research project. We collaborated with the Georgia Fintech Academy. We actually polled 1,600 consumers. And again, not surprisingly, about 2/3 primarily they think of themselves as mobile first, using a mobile device and sometimes a computer. They still very much place value on the branch. That was another question that we asked. And most of our respondents said having a branch nearby is extremely important. One of the things that's even more interesting is Gen Z's answers were not that much different than all the others. So they still do find value in the branch. They may not want to go into it all the time, but they want to know it's there.
Right. And when you hear a lot of kind of anecdotal information, people think, oh, they don't go in the branch at all. They're just always on their phone. That's all they care about. And that's not always the case.
And they don't necessarily go in as often. They may not go in at all, but they want to know it's there.
It's there.
If they need
right.
it.
Exactly. So if somebody wants to connect with TAG Fintech Society, what's the best way to do that and get involved?
Yeah, we have the website up, georgiafintech.org,
Correct.
and you can contact us there. We're always looking for new members. We're looking for people to come in and bring new energy and bring new ideas, and we're welcome.
Right, everybody in the ecosystem is welcome.
Of
right?
course,
absolutely.
Yep,
And
exactly.
even people from outside the city. The LinkedIn page we have as well, the TAG Fintech Society, is a great place to keep up to date on the latest information. We have events coming up. I know we've got September and October already covered. We pretty much have some type of networking and content-driven event almost on a monthly basis. And we've got the preview, about a 2-page summary of some of the report I just mentioned coming up, the ecosystem report that's out there on the website, georgiafintech.org now. Full report coming up later in the year, probably in October.
Well, Glenn and Mike, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We'll be back in a few at Fintech South 2024.